Here's what Pittsburgh is talking about. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's been 20 years this week since Fred Rogers, aka Mr. Rogers, passed away. And I think I feel that way living here because it feels like he's still around. We're revisiting one from the vault today to celebrate the newest incarnation of his legacy, the wildly popular, now 10-year-old animated series Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. It's Wednesday, March 1st. I'm Megan Harris, and this is CityCast Pittsburgh. So I'm with Chris Loggins, supervising producer on the show. Daniel Tiger is the company's first show after the Fred Rogers original. What was that like for you, coming in as part of the process to reimagine something that generations of kids already knew and loved? Like, were you excited, nervous? Did you watch the show as a kid?
I did watch the show as a kid. I remember, I say that one of my first television memories was watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and I watched all kinds of TV, so it wasn't just like, I was like a Mr. Rogers super fan. I'm not going to act like that, but I do remember watching the show and seeing a segment from Picture Picture when he would go over to the painting and he would show a video about how people make things, and it was the one about how people make peanut butter. And I have a very early memory of the visuals of the jars going down in the factory line and Mr. Rogers explaining about how the peanuts are turned into peanut butter and they go into the jar and everything. So definitely did watch the show, had a definite familiarity with it.
I love that it's a food memory that really stuck with you. Isn't that
Yes,
essential to us as humans?
yes. Probably had something to do about I knew as a kid, we all probably ate a lot of peanut butter and it was like, oh, that's where that comes from.
Absolutely.
Which is a cool thing that Mr. Rogers did. But as far as working on the show, I think all of us felt good about the work that we were doing before the show premiered. But there was a little bit of nervousness knowing that it's the first show that was produced by Fred Rogers Productions since
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers. So, very high bar and high expectations.
Yeah, because he passed in 2003. So then this is, 9 years later. It's the first, I imagine, the first show that he's not actively involved in the production of. Did he ever talk about, being interested in the form of animation and that kind of thing? Because Daniel does really bring the whole neighborhood into the 21st century. He's a legacy character. He's familiar, but he's different. He's his own person.
I unfortunately never had a chance to meet Mr. Rogers, but I work with several people who did work on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and have a lot of foundational knowledge. And I've learned that Mr. Rogers did talk about animation and was thinking about that as an art form and what he could do with it and what the company could do with animation. So that is helpful to know that it was something that he was thinking about.
Yeah, I love that. How do you decide on, kind of the trajectory of the shows, the plot lines or the lessons that Daniel gets to learn day to day or the situations that he's in? What are those conversations like and who gets to be part of them?
Well, on everything that we do at Fred Rogers Productions, we work with child development advisors to inform the decisions we're making. So I mentioned working with people that worked on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and our advisors on Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, many of them worked with Mr. Rogers on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Hedda Sherapan is one of those people.
Oh, wow.
She's
So
been
it's a continuation really of the same process that you guys were using in the 70s and 80s.
Yes, in a way. And actually going back even before that, Fred would meet with his advisor at the time, Margaret McFarland, and they would have meetings. She was a pioneer in the field of child psychology, and he learned a lot from her. And she would help him have ideas that then would get incorporated in his scripts. And fun fact, Margaret Tiger and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood is named after Margaret
Aw.
McFarland. So we kind of honor her legacy in that way, but we still rely upon child development advisors to elevate our stories. So we meet as a group and we decide on themes, special areas of focus, content that we want to address in a season, and put forth various ideas. But then we also present that to our writing team and we talk to them about what would make an entertaining stories that cover these themes. And once we have that initial conversation, we start to put together a roadmap for the season of the types of stories we want to tell. And we all get together and have a big kickoff discussion to map out episodes for any given season. And it's a really fun collaborative process.
Yeah, I mean, some of the words you're using strike me as almost funny for children's programming, right? Like content um, and things like that. Like, it's not how I typically think of how I would view a kid's show. But of course, it makes perfect sense that that's how you're creating one on the back end. I don't know if you have kids. I have a new baby at home.
Congratulations.
Thank you. A ton of parents, I got to tell you, have warned me expressly against a lot of children's programming, all kinds of shows. But Daniel somehow seems to get the seal of approval despite the singing. I've been warned about shows that sing. So how do you strike that balance that, like, teaches, feels memorable, also sings, and doesn't grate on adults too much?
I think it's because, well, first of all, I think it's a credit to the musicians that work on our show. Many of them have kids themselves, and I'm sure they're watching children's shows and they want to make songs, and we call them the strategy songs, the songs that Daniel sings about different things like dealing with mad feelings or trying new foods or
Yeah.
sharing. And they do a great job of making them musical, and we often use the word sticky, memorable.
Yeah, a friend of
Um,
mine, when I told him I was going to talk to you today, like started singing one at me immediately.
that they're so but that's the other thing. I think that's another reason why to use your language, Daniel gets the seal of approval is because these are universal life lessons that are relevant in the lives of children, but also as you grow older. Um, I know that the show is all about empathy and managing emotions, and for preschoolers, new experiences, and these are things that I think we all experience and use throughout life. And these are songs that are to help in those areas. So that's why I think that it resonates in that way. And every day I find myself thinking of a strategy to use from the show, whether it's when you feel so mad that you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to four. Or if you have to go potty, stop and go right away. We all need that one every day.
I love this. I hope that you're in an interstitial or a promo for the show somewhere just doing that.
Yes, that would be great.
Well, and I'm curious, like, as you've developed some of this, how much of it still feels like Pittsburgh? Because, if you even watch some back episodes of Fred, there are little pieces of the set and things like that, like, if you grew up in this city, or you've lived here for any amount of time, like, it feels right. Like, it feels like Pittsburgh.
Right.
Is Daniel able to capture any of that same magic?
I do think so. And we are often thinking about, or I should say, we're constantly thinking about ways to incorporate Pittsburgh into the show. And we've done so in little ways, not only Pittsburgh, but also Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So there are nods to both. As I said, Daniel's neighborhood is the neighborhood of make believe. So some of the pieces from that set, whether it's the clock factory or the museum go round, Ferris wheel, they are seen in Daniel Tiger's neighborhood. But also, much like Fred Rogers would go out and visit people around Pittsburgh, real neighbors, and learn about things. We do that in Daniel Tiger's neighborhood in our live action segments that appear between the two animated stories. And we film all of those in and around Pittsburgh. And we've been everywhere from the Children's Museum to Phipps to Mount Washington to help run the incline.
Yeah.
So we feature Pittsburgh in that way. And we work with children that are not actors. They are not professional trained actors. They're real Pittsburgh kids. And one of my favorite parts of the job is hearing when people find out that I work on the show, they'll say, "Oh, wow, I saw my favorite pizza shop, or I saw the park that I go to in the show." And oftentimes it can seem that real places that are featured on television, even in children's television, are usually the bigger cities like New York or Los
Yeah.
Angeles. So it feels really cool to highlight Pittsburgh in that way. We call them postcards from Pittsburgh.
Oh,
Uh,
cute.
and and we also call the kids that appear them. They wear a red sweater, just like Mr.
Of course,
Rogers,
I
and
like you do.
and they're our red sweater kids, and get to go out and do some really fun things and meet some cool people and learn about the people in our neighborhood. But even smaller ways, you can see the details of Pittsburgh in the show. So there's a post office in the neighborhood of Make Believe, and if you look closely, we put some Pittsburgh icons on the stamps that appear in the post office. So there's
That's
a
so
yellow,
careful.
yeah, yes, yes. We try to be thoughtful about everything we do. So the yellow bridges appear on some of the stamps. There's a building that is reflective of the Cathedral of Learning on the
Mm-hmm.
stamps in the background there. In every episode, Daniel also has an imagination moment where he pretends about something that's happening in his life. But in one of the imagination moments, Daniel is pretending to be a baseball player, and we did intentionally choose to use black and yellow for his uniform, highlighting our local team colors.
Yeah, of course. I'm impressed that you got Daniel out of his red sweater. I hear that that's a really big part of the show.
Yes, yes.
What's your favorite part about the production and the sharing of this community? What keeps you there? Producer to producer.
My favorite part about working on the show throughout the years is when we get letters, Facebook posts, emails from people that are using the show and telling us about what it means to them, and a time when a strategy came in very handy, or a certain episode that is meaningful to them. That's my favorite part of the job, because um, that is how we know that the show is resonating on a bigger level than we might understand on the day to day.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too heavy, but I remember in the wake of Tree of Life, which of course was right down the street from Fred Rogers' actual home here in Pittsburgh. So many people were pointing to Fred Rogers Productions for the services and some of the conversational guidance for kids and things like that, about just how to have these tough conversations with little ones that have no idea what's going on,
Right.
but can feel that their parents are in a state.
Right. Yes, and we get a lot of powerful letters about strategies that are used in situations like that, and how explaining things like that, or coping with things like that as an adult can be difficult. Um, and without going into too many details, there's just we do get a lot of good feedback about all of that.
Yeah, yeah. Chris Loggins is the supervising producer for the animated series Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which is still made here in Pittsburgh by Fred Rogers Productions. Chris, thank you so much for talking to us here on CityCast.
Thank you for having me.
A little news before you go. Pennsylvania Representative Mark Rozzi never seemingly planned to be House Speaker, and that's probably a good thing because he only made it a couple of months. He announced his resignation early yesterday, and Democrat Joanna McClinton made history by succeeding him. McClinton is the first female speaker and the second black speaker of the Pennsylvania House. She was supported by all 102 Democrats in the chamber and no Republicans. And the Trib reports that Vento's Pizza in East Liberty is closing this weekend. The family-owned spot has been serving pizza and hoagies for almost 7 decades. And Papa Vento, the original founder, was also the founder of Franco's Italian Army. They were a classic fan group celebrating the beloved Steeler Franco Harris, who also died last year on the anniversary of his most iconic achievement, the Immaculate Reception. That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. A special thanks to all the listeners of the podcast out there and folks who read and write into the newsletter. We got a special note yesterday from allegedly the niece of Mr. Rogers herself, saying that she misses him terribly and really appreciates everyone when they bring up his memory and keep it alive. Thanks to her. If you're liking the show, please tell a friend, rate us, leave us a review, and of course, subscribe to that newsletter. All the links are in our show notes. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to y'all soon.
All right, now I'm ready.
Gotcha.
I have this all written down on my other computer.
Cue cards are important. I appreciate it.